mention a couple of housekeeping issues before I pass over to the chair to take the meeting. This meeting is being live streamed and will be archived for future viewing. Could you please ensure that any discussions that are held during the meeting and not within the chat, unless you have any technical difficulties and you need to get hold of us, either use the chat then or use your telephone and contact us outside of the meeting. But we would like all discussion to be held within the meeting. In order for the chair to know that you are waiting to speak, could you please use the raise your hand function in the Teams software? If your raise your hand function isn't working and you've got a camera and you can come on screen, just raise your hand. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr Karen a chroeso i'r cyfarfod Pwyllgor Gwasanaethau Democrataidd Bro Morgannwg. Thank you much, Karen. Warm welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Vale of Glamorgan's Democratic Services Committee. We start with item 1 of the agenda, which is apologies for absence. Karen, do we have any apologies for absence today's meeting? I believe there's everyone's here bar one person.
I don't have any apologies, Chair, but as you're aware, the decision notice that we have to complete after this meeting has to be placed on the website within 7 days. If a member comes to us before those 7 days, then I can place their apologies in the decision notice. If not, it'll have to be subject to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. Item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting of this committee, which were held on the 4th of April. Would it be possible to have somebody who was present at that meeting confirm that they are a correct account of the meeting that took place on that day? I believe that Councillor Carroll, who is here today, was in the chair at that meeting. Councillor Carroll, are you happy to move the minutes?
Yeah, happy to propose.
Yeah, and is there somebody who'd like to second those?
I think I can second the.
Yeah, correct. I believe that you sent apologies to that meeting, actually, Councillor Thomas. I know that Councillor Hanks.
Yeah, I did actually. You're right. I did. Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Hanks is seconding the minutes as a correct and a correct account. So thank you very much. I believe we're now all present in the meeting. Item 3 is to receive declarations of interest under the Council Code of Conduct. Does anybody have any declarations they'd like to make with regards to today's meeting? Nobody is making any declarations, so we move on to item 4, which is the report of the operational manager for ICT, which is Nick Wheeler. For those who are new to this, to the council and to the committee, this is a standing item which we have on every agenda of this committee to discuss issues relating to ICT and members, and in this context, members means everybody who is a voting member of the council, so elected and co-opted members. So can I pass you over to Nick Wheeler for his report?
Thank you, Chair. You just covered off the 2 first items I was going to cover off then, so thank you for the context. So straight into it then. So the first of the key issues detailed in this report relate to the provisioning of ICT kits to the new co-opted members and co-opted members following the elections in May. A cross-departmental project team was assembled to plan and deliver all of the required themes that made up the hardware refresh programme. These themes were ICT hardware and software, training, terms of use, and future support. So the type of hardware and software was specified by the project team based on the needs of members and the need for this kit to be resilient and last the course. The laptops carry cases, headsets and spare chargers were purchased by the National Procurement Services procurement framework. The mobile phones and call and data plans were purchased through the council's corporate mobile phone contract, with the mobile phone hard cases being purchased from Amazon following cost options appraisals to demonstrate best value there, of course. The equipment was delivered to members during the market stall sessions in May, and the training provided at that time covered the use of the equipment and the terms of use in the context of information security, data protection and acceptable use. All committee agendas, minutes and reports, etc. will continue to be uploaded to the committee hub electronically to allow for easy access to these documents and to maintain a reduction in volume and cost of hard copy documents in line with the council's print strategy. Further support has been provided to members on a one-to-one basis following the original market stall sessions. and ongoing ICT support is available to all members via the Council's ICT service desk. Discussions have started with the newly appointed Director of Resources on how to improve the support that is provided to members going forward. The scope of these discussions to date has been around training and development, ICT support, and the support for remote and hybrid meetings. We intend to carry out a members' ICT survey, probably after the summer break, the summer recess, to further inform these discussions and to establish feedback on the ICT equipment that you've been provided with. So the second of the key issues detailed in the report relate to Office 365 and in particular remote and hybrid meetings. Microsoft Teams has proved to be invaluable throughout the pandemic to allow staff and members to work and communicate remotely and to ensure that council services could be maintained and that the democratic process could continue and remain transparent. Now that COVID regulations have essentially been lifted, there's a new requirement to facilitate hybrid meetings. So that's where some meeting delegates sit in a traditional meeting room like the council chamber, while others attend the same meeting remotely. Democratic Services and ICT colleagues have recently been testing a hybrid meeting solution. This technology was successfully used last week by Cabinet to facilitate one of their meetings and will be available to facilitate other hybrid meetings going forward. The functionality to provide live Welsh and English subtitles and live bilingual translations for meetings that to be live streamed going forward are currently being reviewed. So the last of my key issues is just to advise committee that the ICT service continues to provide work experience and training for younger workers. I currently have one trainee post permanently on my establishment. That's normally a 3-year contract, and at the end of that then hopefully there's an opportunity for our investment in those individuals to move forward. We've currently got 3 apprentices in the team. They've recently joined and they're doing extremely well, so hopefully they're going to be the future of IT, and we essentially use them to grow our own. So they're essentially the highlights from my report, Chair, so happy to take any questions at this point.
Diolch yn fawr, Nick. Does anybody have any questions for the Operational Manager for ICT? Please use the hands function to indicate. Thank you. Councillor Marnie.
Thank you very much. I think it's well documented and certainly known to Nick and Jeffrey my total and utter dissatisfaction with the Vale IT department stretching back from my first days as the council 10 years ago. My latest, shall I say, disappointment, I know that I spoke to Jeff about this some days ago, so he knows what will be coming, is that over the period of COVID, and certainly the last 18 months or so, I've had absolute murder getting in touch with senior officers and getting replies to them, both by email, but by phone. But one of the things that's really concerned me and driven me mad with trying to contact people by phone is that using the phone numbers on the footers of emails from senior managers and other officers, I've had literally time after time after time a dead tone coming up on the phone, you know, that horrible screeching or beeping sound with no such number, you've dialed an incorrect number, no such number known, and all the rest of it. I thought I was going absolutely mad. This is for a good 18 months now. Just by sheer chance, a month ago, speaking to an officer of the council, they revealed that, rather bizarrely, and I have absolutely no idea would do this, that where everybody's departed for their homes, and as far as I'm concerned, if they only depart to their homes, that's fine, but then your phone number, home phone number, becomes your office number, as far as I'm concerned, or you route it directly from your county hall phone number. But rather bizarrely, that our officers have been routing their phones through their laptops. Now, I don't know why anybody would need to do that anyway, but okay, fair enough. But this officer revealed that, yeah, what actually happens is, by using this system, every time I turn fold the laptop down or turn off the laptop, within working hours, so to say, not out of hours, it comes up as beep, 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 no such number or whatever. I was literally speaking to officers one day on their home number, on their office number, and the next number is saying no such number known or whatever. I was absolutely livid. But I was even more livid to find out that, and I don't know whether Nick takes the blame for this, or Democratic Services, or whoever made this ludicrous and bizarre decision to implement such a system that goes through laptops and then comes up as no such known number when the laptop is turned off. I mean, what on earth is going on? It's just totally and utterly bizarre. I'd have thought it perfectly simple just to reroute your office number at County Hall to your home number or to your mobile. And I've spoken to somebody after finding this out in private industry who deals with this all the time, and said they're flabbergasted as well, because they do exactly the same and they deal with many industries and offices and firms using this sort of system. And it's absolutely simple just to put an answer phone message on when this sort of thing goes. So what's going on there then, Nick?
Yes, can you provide an answer to Councillor Marnie's query there, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit difficult to go into detail without having the specific details and timescales of these issues. So the routing of the desktop phone in the office to personal mobile phones or even council mobile phones, the tech works. The issue that I've seen anecdotally is how this technology is actually being used by officers. So, as Councillor Marnie rightly said, if you transfer your desktop number to a mobile phone and for whatever reason you switch that mobile phone off, the call isn't going to connect. It would normally give you take you to the answer phone message of the service provider. If that isn't happening, that's kind of, unless it's a corporate mobile phone, that element is out of my hands, because they're diverting them to personal mobile phones, and obviously there are lots of service providers in that arena. The soft phone issue. Now this is an interesting one, because I think that is essentially the strategy going forward to support hybrid working. So Office 365 is just being upgraded to provide telephony functionality. And the plan is to essentially replace all the desktop telephony with Office 365. So the tech is the same. The difference is the means that you actually answer the phone. So your desktop phone in the office is essentially what they call voice over internet protocol. So your voice goes through the network. It turns into a digital signal and it goes through a network. Exactly the same as a laptop with a soft phone on. The difference being is that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to switch a desktop phone off, whereas, as Councillor Marnie suggested, you can actually turn your laptop off, and at that point, the call, it obviously won't be delivered, but it should then be diverted to the voicemail of the recipient. The third issue I think that Councillor Marnie raised then was the no such number being recognised. Now, that is when an external caller phones a council number, is my understanding, and you're essentially getting a no number recognised message back. Now, my understanding is that fairly recently, within the last couple of months, quite a big mail shot went out to the public, 15,000 odd letters, which contained a single mobile phone number. And I think it was in relation to the £150 payment that could be claimed from the council by qualifying citizens. Now, that one single number was inundated, as you'd appreciate. C1V stepped in to assist to take those calls. The only way that could happen is for that original number to be diverted from the council's mobile phone system across to the contact centre platform. That essentially, as it turned out, because there was no warning for this from an IT perspective, I didn't know this stuff was happening, essentially took all of the capacity out of the corporate telephony system. So once you'd had a certain number of calls being handled at a particular time, the next call that would come in once the switch had been saturated, you would then get the no number recognised, because the system couldn't handle anymore. So that was an unusual peak based on the mail shot of 15,000 letters, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Nick. I mean, I think if I'm understanding the last few sentences you said, essentially that our system crashed because there hadn't been internal communication to explain to IT that this was taking place and that 15,000 letters were being sent out. I appreciate that this isn't a scrutiny meeting. This is the Democratic Services Committee. I'm going to ask Councillor Marnie to come back in, but I think also some of this I think will need to be perhaps written down and explained to all members to say what has been happening and what is happening with ICT. And there is an argument, I suppose, that some of this should have been covered off within the report as well. I'll ask Councillor Marnie, and I see that Councillor Thomas has also got his hand up as well, but we'll come to him in a few moments. Councillor Marnie.
Well, first I must open with an apology that I'm obviously not bright enough to understand most of what Nick actually said. I didn't have a clue what you're talking about most of the time, Nick, to be honest with you. Firstly, some sideshow of some communication I'm talking about from 18 months ago, and I've documented that with complaints to Rob Thomas, the CEO. So what that mail out thing you're on about, that's a sideshow. I'm rather alarmed, quite frankly, that you're not aware of this sort of thing. All I want to know, as a simple person, if I ring a phone number, I want somebody to answer it. That happens decreasing amounts now as well. It seems to be just about everybody. And in fact, I've mentioned this before. I made 6 phone calls to 6 different offices the other day. In desperation, turned to the contact Vale Centre. They made another 5 before they gave up. That was 11 straight phone calls to different people, all on answer phone. But at least we could say there is an answer phone, even if many of those calls weren't returned. All I want to know, like anybody else, to pick up a phone and somebody answers at the end, or there's an answer phone message. All the stuff that you just went on about just now, I haven't got a clue what you were talking about, quite frankly. It's not good enough. It's been going on for ages. It's nothing to do with the bailouts. I don't know why you introduced that, quite frankly. All I want to do, and I'm sure everybody else wants to do, is a response or hope of response through answer phone. I just thought it quite simple. Other organisations manage to do it all the time. Yet again, the Vale IT department seems to be deficient in this matter. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk again and to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Marnie. Are there any further comments from Nick from an ICT perspective, or do you like to note Councillor Marnie's comments and respond to them at a later point in writing and telling the rest of the committee as well?
Yes, happy to note that, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mine's comparatively simple. When we were given the new kit, and part of that was the new phones, how come they didn't migrate our old phone numbers across to our new phones in order that people who already had our old numbers could then continue to contact us if needs be, for those who were re-elected, of course I'm talking about, whereas now I have to reissue or have to get some new business cards with my new number, or or change the number on the current cards, and reissue these to people who can no longer connect with me by phone. It would have seemed simpler to just migrate our numbers across. Thank you.
So,
Nick, you come back on that.
Thank you, Chair. That's a really good question, and it sounds like the obvious thing that would be done. Typically with everything ICT related, it's a lot more complicated behind the scenes than that. And my understanding is it was related to the additional SIM cards that needed to be purchased from O2 or Telefonica, whatever they're called now, who have our corporate, or we have a corporate contract with, and it was all to do with how the SIMs and the new phones were managed. If there's any further detail, I mean, happy to take this back to the team that manage this in the office. I'm happy to take that back to see if there's any additional detail that I can to share with you. If that's okay.
Can I just come back on that, please, Chair? Sure. I'm with O2 for my personal phone, and when I renew my phone, or when I change my phone or upgrade my phone, they migrate my number across, and all my accounts and everything else comes across automatically. It can be done sort of on the individual level, and as this phone is then from the phone is a new phone for an individual, I understand it comes through the organisation, but it's still a phone to a phone. I can't see why that would be more complicated. Thank you.
I think it will be helpful as you know, for Nick to be able to provide an answer for that for both Councillor Thomas and for the rest of the committee, if that's acceptable. Councillor Thomas. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nick. I'm not sure if you're the best person to raise this with, but it's a question in relation to the IDEV training. I completed a couple of modules on the system last week, and having completed them, it then came back to say 0% completed on both modules. I was just wondering if that had been registered by anyone else, and if so, you might know why that is.
Chair, if I can respond.
Can respond to this. Yeah.
Yes, Chair, if I can respond to that. That has been something that has been picked up with the Democratic Services, and we have emailed members about this, Chair, to let them know there is a problem, and if they could let us know as soon as they can when they've encountered this. So I'll take back what Councillor Carroll has said, but would you mind, Councillor Carroll, let me know which ones you actually undertook, because there's been a glitch in the system.
I have emailed, so that should be fine, but it was the domestic violence module and the data protection module.
Okay, yeah, there's been a glitch in the system with OD. We let them know, and they'll automatically then amend that. So that's great. But what I would ask is, if members are having the same problem, could they just please let us know in Democratic, and we will sort it as soon as possible. There are a number of issues in OD at the moment. There's some staffing matters being considered because a number of staff are currently not available. So, but if you let Democratic know, we'll get onto it straight away. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Carroll and Karen. Councillor Hanks.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if you see the names going down the side, some have got councillor at the end of them, some of them have got guest, and I wondered if they could all be uniform. So either we have all surnames and then first names, and can we mark as councillor? Because I see George is George Guest. Sometimes there's a mixture of names and you're not sure which is the first name and which is the second name, the surname. Yeah. I just wondered that might be easier, especially if you're chairing a meeting. I just wondered why George comes up as guest and not as a councillor.
I don't know if the Councillor Carroll would like to answer that, but I can answer that as well after, if you like.
I think it's probably because I'm using my personal mobile phone.
That's it.
Yes, it comes up because it's not coming through the council system. So that's
yes.
Why. Put councillor in the brackets if that's helpful.
It's just that, you know, sometimes they're councillors, sometimes they're, I can't see it. Kevin Marnie now is Kevin Marnie, and then Ewan is Ewan Goodjohn. They seem to be quite muddled, and I just wondered if they could be more uniform.
Yes,
because
Chair.
It's because I have no confidence in the rail IT thing after 10 years of fiasco. I use my own equipment, so that would.
Right. Okay, no problem.
Yes,
thank you.
Everyone who comes in on a personal device normally comes in as a guest. If they come in on a Vail laptop, they've already been set up as councillor. So when they come in as a personal guest, you'll see, because the members of the public will come on as well when they're speaking at planning or at scrutiny. They'll come on as a guest. But as Councillor Carroll said, he could amend it himself. So if you would like to make a recommendation of that, we can ask anybody then who comes on to actually put councillor in front of them for future reference if you wanted to do that as a committee. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I don't mind if everybody else is agreeing, then it might be more helpful, but I just wondered why, and now I know. So thank you, Chair.
So thank you, Councillor Hanks. I mean, see, you know, so if the Jeffrey wants to speak on this matter.
Only to say, Chairman, the obvious issue, if members are dialing into the meetings on their personal devices, we got little control over the way they're describing their attendance in the narrative catchment. I accept Councillor Hanks that it probably is helpful for the chair and other members to know who is dialing into the meeting. I note Councillor Marnie's comments about IT, and going back to the points that he has raised, I have discussed the very issue with Councillor Manny and his concerns, and I know the Chief Executive is aware of that, because I'm again aware that the Councillor Manny has written again to the Chief Executive outlining his concerns on the points he's already raised earlier on in the discussion. So I am aware of the situation, and I think Nick has covered it off as best as he can do, but we certainly are aware of it, and I would have hoped by now that Councillor Manny would have had a response from the Chief Executive dealing with some of the points he's raised with members.
No, I haven't, but thanks anyway.
It would be useful, I think, for this committee to hear the responses to the concerns that have been put forward in relation to ICT and engagement. So it'd be good to have that in future. With regards to the issue raised by Councillor Hanks, we'll be shortly moving to the new Civico system. So I'm assuming that people will be entering the system through their Vail laptops rather than through personal laptops through Teams. So I think we'll see how that goes and whether that's problematic in future. With regards to the report that's in front of us from the Operational Manager for ICT, are there any further questions relating to that? I see no hands, therefore I'll assume that people are happy. So could we have somebody move there's only one recommendation.
Move recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas, and Councillor Hanks is seconding, I assume. So thank you very much. So thank you for your discussions there. We move on to item 5, which is a report from the Head of Democratic Services, Jeffreys. This is the report entitled Discharge of the Democratic Services Committee Functions and Training and Development. This report is functioning in many ways as an introduction to the Democratic Services Committee, so it includes a fair amount of information and background information. I believe there are 3 main elements to this. One is the introduction to the committee, one is a section around training, one is a section around personal development reviews. I'm going to suggest that we take those in 3 different sections so that we can have a brief conversation if required after each of them, rather than try and deal with a number of different issues at the same time. So Jeff, as Operational Head of Enterprise Services, please give your report.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for outlining the report for me. I was going to do that myself, but very helpful that you doing that. So the first element of the report, as the Chair alluded to, in fact we did indicate in the induction programme that we were going to do what we've done similarly with other meetings, with a bit of an induction session. But given that the terms of reference and remit to this committee is fairly tight, and that's set out in paragraph 1.2 of the report in front of members, which is, as you know, this would have been in front of the members in the council summons for the annual meeting on the 23rd of May. So those bullet points set out in 1.2 really encapsulate the entirety of the remit of the committee in terms of its obligations. So it didn't seem a great deal of sense to labour the point in an induction session with members, having there's probably a bit of fatigue already out there with members given what they've already gone through to date, and I'm conscious we're not far away from an August recess, so it probably didn't seem I wouldn't say merit or worthy enough, but certainly the bulk of the information is contained in this report. The key issues for consideration, and this is essentially around the role of the Democratic Services team and its relationship based on the support it provides, and also in the context of what the Local Government Measure 2011 requires. So in 2.2, that covers off really the main core activities of the team, which is Karen Bowen's team, and Karen's is obviously present in the meeting. So that covers off the main areas which really, that activity that service does. And in my report later in the agenda, talks specifically about the resources within Karen's service area and her team. One of the main areas within the terms of reference of this committee is in regard to certainly in regard to the staff and the provision of staff, accommodation, and other resources which are available to myself in my statutory role as Head of Democratic. And in paragraph 2.4, that actually sets out the measure guidance, and that's the statutory guidance, and that really enshrines the the principles of the guidance, and also the support and arrangements for myself to fulfil the democratic services function of this authority. As indicated in paragraph 2.5, I'm not making any recommendations or proposals in terms of additional resources at this time in regard to the provision of additional staff, accommodation, and any other resources in exercise of my functions as the statutory head of Democratic. Although there are some matters that are within the body of the report in terms of, I think the chair will recall that there was a recent report that went via corporate resources and performance regarding a suite of guidance on the new Local Government and Election Wales Act. And there's certainly some matters in there that are, and as Nick alluded to in his report, currently under consideration in terms of additional resources that we're looking at, and that discussion is ongoing with the director. But I don't want to obviously mix that conversation, as I appreciate the chair wanted to keep this broken down into different sections. Paragraph 2.6 highlights some of the challenges faced by the service, predominantly dealing with the pandemic and the ongoing pressures as a consequence of the pandemic, and having to get things like members trained up on new equipment, certainly Teams. Initially, when we had the pandemic, I think if members recall back in certainly in early 2020, we were operating on Zoom initially. We were also operating on GoTo for some school admissions appeals, stuff that we had to do. So we've used different solutions to get to where we currently are over that period of time. And as Nick alluded to in his report, we will be moving to hybrid meetings, and that will be starting in earnest from September. The Act also is covered off in this report in terms of the consequential changes and impact on the council's constitution, and obviously that has been subject to reports to council over the last 18 months. So, and I dare say, as a consequence of those challenges, and bearing in mind the consultation on the suite of guidance that was considered recently by Corporate Performance Scrutiny Committee and the Cabinet, there will be some underlying issues that we will have to deal with as we go forward. We're not expecting that draft guidance to be cleared and back out in its final versions from Welsh Government till the autumn, possibly late autumn. So we won't know how that will actually wash out in terms of the actual requirements. But all Welsh authorities had to respond by the 22nd of July, and you appreciate that deadline closed last Friday. So happy to take any questions, Chair, up to that point.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Jeff. I mean, just to explain to people, obviously, that the consultation on guidance of principal authorities, as Jeff said, closed last Friday. It's previously been to Cabinet and to Corporate Performance and Resources. I would anticipate that when a decision comes from Welsh Government on that guidance, that will be reported back to this committee, because obviously it affects the sort of the Democratic Services Committee. That's an introduction to the background. Does anybody have any questions for Jeff on with regards to that at this point in time? I see no hands, therefore carry on, Jeff. Okay,
thank you, Chair. I appreciate it's quite a meaty report there. So I'm moving on to member development strategy. So the information contained in paragraph 2.7 onwards sets out the provision of a member development strategy which sits within the remit of this committee. The strategy was reviewed and updated and endorsed by the committee following, as I said, a refresh back last year. That was reported in July 2021 and subsequently went on to Cabinet for approval. And the refreshed strategy has also received endorsement from the WLGA. The strategy itself is attached for members at Appendix 1 to the report, and it's purely there for members' information. Moving on from the member development strategy, from paragraph 2.12 sets out the induction programme that we undertook following the May elections. That was recently approved by the committee back in April earlier this year, and has been basically linked, well, sorry, not linked, but certainly set out in paragraph of 2.12 the report. The highlighted areas within that induction programme relate to the mandatory or essential sessions. Sorry, Chair, there are two areas which weren't highlighted in that report that members have with them. One was the rules of debate, and the other one was corporate parenting and safeguarding. Those were also sessions which were considered to be essential, and that information is there to give members some context around how much has gone on up to this present moment in time. Obviously, quite a bit as it links in there is highlighted as essential. We would have expected members to been to most of those essential sessions. There have been some mop-up sessions, unfortunately, and I think that's fair because, as I indicated earlier, there's been quite a lot coming in the members' direction since the May elections in terms of commitment time that they've had to give up, not just in terms of doing the induction, but obviously getting in to the run of meetings since the annual meeting. So there's been quite a lot of information being passed on to members, and hopefully they're taking that on board. I'm talking in particular about new members who perhaps wouldn't have a great feel for what they would have been expected. Clearly, returning members would know from 2017 what they would have had to deal with, but certainly new members, as much as we've tried to do in the run up to the elections, we did some open sessions for candidates to try and give them the heads up, and then clearly the induction pack would have had a lot of information for candidates just to give them some insight of what they expected, but acknowledge there's been quite a lot in that very short window of time, as there's always been, between the May and the end of July session, there's been quite a lot of business for members to deal with. Appendix 2 to the report sets out some attendance figures of those sessions, and that's broadly information for members just to see where we are. And as I said, that will indicate where we've had to do some mop-up sessions, but broadly speaking, they've been well attended and hopefully well received. We will be doing a review of the induction programme, and we will be doing a survey of that programme in the near future. As part of the actual induction session, as Nick alluded to earlier in his report, ICT kit was provided to members, and we also set members up on the IDEV induction training system for staff and members. Hopefully members found that helpful. I appreciate Councillor Carroll, and I know some other members have experienced some difficulties in getting recognised as completing some of those modules. It is a glitch in the system, as Karen alluded to, but hopefully we will be through that process and obviously using that process going forward for refreshes as well of training some members, keep up to date with current and emerging changes in legislation, for example. Do you want me to stop there, Chair?
If you wouldn't mind, Jeff, I think you've set out that there's going to be a review of the training and the induction process, which is going to be to sending a survey to members, and that will then be reported back for discussion to this committee in November. Obviously, this is the sort of the start of that process, and so it's good to explain to people. So I was just going to see, and I can see there is a hand up, whether people had any questions regarding either the process or broad comments that they might wish to make at this time about the sort of things that we should be looking at when that review is being done. Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note in your report that there are still a lot of members, as you say, who are outstanding, particularly on very important training issues such as finance and introduction to scrutiny, which are kind of the most important training aspects for a lot of councillors who don't have experience in that kind of field. I was just wondering what provisions you're making for mop-ups to be done quickly and quick enough to be done, hopefully in September.
Would you like me to answer that, Chair?
If you would mind, Jeff, you want to start first?
It is a tricky one, Councillor Goodjohn. We can only appeal to members, you know, to attend or to do the IDEV modules where it's essential, and without naming individuals, which I'm conscious I don't want to do, because there is obviously some reasons are good reasons for not attending training. So, but we will need to pick that up, and we will be undertaking, if necessary, one-to-one mop-up sessions. But acknowledge the point, yes, that the training sessions are there for a good reason, and that's to build knowledge around those specific subject areas. And it is obviously important to elected members to participate in those sessions so that they feel that they are adequate in undertaking the various roles that they have as an elected member. But I do acknowledge the point.
And does that answer your question, Councillor Goodjohn?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Haynes?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, about the training, I got to admit I found it overly long, overly complicated, too much of it. And to be honest, well, I can't see how the review is going to make it much better. You know, they're asking councillors to fill in a survey to basically suggest how to improve it, when the real improvement should be done through checking the engagement of the training at the time. And the courses I've been on, pretty much it was only the same people were asking questions. Obviously, some councillors must know everything, but the same people asking questions all the time. And they were very few. So the engagement is pretty low. I really think this could be done a lot better, and I think it should be one of our work programmes, to be honest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. I don't know if there were specific points that Jeff wants to pick up now. Should we hear from Councillor Carroll first and then see if there's anything that's in common that you want to refer to? Is there anybody else who also wants to speak on this matter? Councillor Carroll?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I concur with a lot of what Councillor Haynes has said on this. I mean, I appreciate there's a balance to be struck in that when members are elected for the first time, especially, they do need to be presented with this information so that they can set the ground running as a member, especially if they're on particular committees that have particular training, for example, planning and licensing, finance for those members on corporate resources, members on audit, for example. But where I do agree with Councillor Haynes on this is it's really unrealistic, I think, to expect people to digest all of that information, to take it on board and then to be able to apply all of it when it's covering not just quite a diverse, but a huge range of different topics, all within a sort of 2-month period at the start of their council term. And then that's sort of seen as being, okay, you're trained in this now, you're good to go for 5 years. And I think maybe what Councillor Haynes said about it being too long and there being just too much information presented at the outset, perhaps when we review this, we could look at instead, in the early stages, members having a more broad outline that covers the basics. Of course, present them with all the information. So there's a handbook or PowerPoint slides that go into more detail so that members can cross-reference that as and when they need to, and then provide more in-depth training sessions further down the line, because I think that may be a better way of getting people to take on board what happens in those sessions and then apply the information and the training to their duties more effectively. And the other point I would make with regard to members missing sessions, I know that various members of our group, for example, have had events on in their ward, for example. They may have been invited to meet certain constituents. Now, when they've got a decision to make whether they attend a training session or carry out an activity that's relevant to their ward, then obviously there's a decision to be taken. So I think that may be the reason why some of these sessions weren't attended, because I think for a typical session 2 separate dates are provided. Now, we all lead busy lives. I don't think it's particularly unusual if members can't make both of those dates that are provided. So it's not really a question as such. It's just something that I think it would be worth considering and to place on the record.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll, and I think we've had both yourself and Councillor have made comments rather than questions there, and it'd be very important, I think, that as many people, we try and encourage as many people as possible within our groups to complete the survey, so there's as broad a response as possible that Democratic Services can consider. Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Chair. I was a bit slow putting my camera on and taking the putting the mic on. I was thinking, sort of like the induction that we did, it'd be similar to any induction that you would have for a new place of work. You're expected to complete your induction and your training within a set period of time. And if I'm not mistaken, and Jeff, I'm sure that a lot of the training that we had is still available to councillors in the membernet or something like that. They would be able to access the information there if there was a training sort of like do you know what, my brain is not let me get any words out today, like screens, sort of different bear with me, screenshots and different things like that. There would be training programs within the different topics and things like that we can refer back to if we're not taking it all in. I mean, I took a lot of notes, but I just wanted to check that with you, Jeff.
Jeff, you'd like to take that?
Yeah, a lot of the information and the sessions we've undertook, we've recorded them and they'll be available after. So there will be a resource available to members. So if I genuinely do understand Councillor Haynes's point and Councillor Carroll's point, about the kitchen sink being thrown at them, and it's not something that we are unaware of, and it's a difficult one to square the wheel on, given expectations about your roles that you need to complete. Obviously, Welsh Government have got their eye on, in terms of standards, best practice, what authorities across Wales should be undertaking, and we're not an outlier in terms of what we're asking members to do at the Vale. Whether we can go to a point of staggering further the information that's being provided, I think is a fair point. The issue of members, and I fully accept the issue of members having competing priorities. Again, is a familiar point being made by elected members, given other pressures, family life, work commitments, other things that go on in members, diaries, for example, whether that's meeting with constituents at a very one-to-one basis or with a group. So we are mindful of that, and that's why we're trying to do the mop-up sessions, provide the mop-up sessions. But please bear in mind that Karen's team is only a small team, and we got finite resources. So we're trying to traverse across. And if you look in the report, the areas that they're covering off, so they've got quite a lot on. So mop-up sessions is something we're factoring in, but that does again take up time, and backfilling that activity obviously means that sometimes we're not going to be doing other pieces of work that we would have been trying to deliver on that. So it is a balance, and I acknowledge the pressures on members, and certainly when we do the survey, if members can give us a full and complete picture of how they've managed the process themselves in terms of their time, what those challenges are, that'll be enormously useful.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff, and hopefully everybody will complete this, and we'll have a more rounded discussion based on the experiences of the wider elected and co-opted members when we come back to this in a few months' time, and we'll hopefully be looking at in the context of not just what the induction process looks like for new councillors or for recently elected councillors, but also what the work programme looks like for member development, which is, I believe, the next part you're going to be talking about, Jeff.
Yeah, so member development. So as the report talks about is obviously we got the member development strategy, and certainly linked to that is the personal development reviews. This process is available to all members of the council. Those members who are in receipt of a senior responsibility salary, they'll be required to have one. There is only one exception to that, and that's the leader of the council. So in roughly in about 12 months' time, I'll be undertaking PDRs of those members to work through any specific needs that they may have. But again, that PDR process available to all members who want to have one. Whilst the non-senior salary members don't have to have one, we certainly encourage them to try and think about how and what else they need in terms of personal development, and that process is obviously there to help members, coordinate that, and obviously allow us then to formalise any training plan and bring that into existence in whatever way we can obviously cater for that to suit as best we can do members' wishes. So that's the PDR process in a nutshell, Chairman. But happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Are there any questions regarding the personal development reviews and member development? I see no hands, therefore we can move back to there's nothing further you want to say on this report, Jeff, is there?
Only to say that please do read the role descriptions that are in the council's constitution. There's a new set that have been recently sort of refreshed by the WLGA and the sort of Pan Wales approach. So these role descriptions, as much as we're trying to give you, as much information about what the council does, what you can expect in terms of your various roles, how to treat information like GDPR, all those subject areas. Some of the role descriptions will also assist you as well in terms of what you should be thinking of as members, and certainly what the members of the public will be looking at. So if you haven't, I'd certainly encourage members to have a look at those role descriptions, and I think that will also give you some insight into what your day-to-day demands can be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jeff. In that case, can I refer us back to our recommendations? And there are 5 different recommendations. I'll skim through them as quickly as possible. So the first recommendation is to present for members' considerations to a future meeting of this committee reports and recommendations in respect of any proposed changes to the number and grade staff required to discharge democratic services functions, and to note that any proposed changes would need to be reported for council for approval. Secondly, to note the member development strategy, which you'll find in Appendix 1. Thirdly, to note the training and development activities undertaken by members since May 22 to date, and that a further report be submitted to the next meeting of the committee on attendance rates at the various induction sessions. I know we do have some of those already. 4, that in accordance with the requirements of the measure, all 54 elected members will be afforded the opportunity to undergo personal development reviews, including members who choose to remain unallocated or independent. 5, that the committee receives an update report on the PDR process, highlighting the development needs identified and to inform a future development programme. Can I ask somebody who's happy with those recommendations, somebody to move them if so? I can see Councillor Thomas and Councillor Handler in their hands, and Councillor Goodjohn has raised a hand electronically. Is that to make a comment, Councillor Goodjohn?
No, sorry, that was just to move.
To show support. Okay, thank you very much. In that case, that's been moved. In that case, we'll move on to item 6, which is the with relation to the Democratic Services Subcommittee. And can I ask Jeff, the head of Democratic Services, to explain this item? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If members refer to the report, the background to the report, paragraph 1.1. The Local Government Measure 2011 established an entitlement to elected members to family absence. And that entitlement created by the measure is subject to members first satisfying conditions prescribed by the regulations. And these regulations, I think there was a report in April last year that went to full council. These regulations were amended in 2021 to increase the adoption absence period for local authority members from 2 weeks to 26 weeks. Consequently, and linked to that, to allow the authority to deal with the various types of family absence, they need to put in place a subcommittee to deal with matters in regard to any, I suppose, appeals in regard to the refusal to grant family absence to any elected members. The actual provisions that set out the process of the regulations are detailed in paragraph 2.6 of the report, and paragraph 2.7 report details the terms of reference of the subcommittee and how it should be constituted to deal with any complaints relating to the or relating to any refusal to grant family absence. And the recommendations, Chair, are contained in the report.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for explaining the report. So the requirement here is that the Democratic Services Subcommittee is appointed. It has 3 members, one of which from each of the 3 largest political groups here within the Vale of Glamorgan. So that's 1 member from the Labour group, 1 member from the Conservative group, 1 member from the Plaid Cymru group. Obviously, this is a nomination, so there's no election process, but it's obviously incumbent upon the various groups to nominate. As the only Plaid Cymru member on this committee, I'm going to be the Plaid Cymru representative on the subcommittee. I believe there are 2 Conservative members on this committee. I don't know if you've had a chance to speak about which of you plans to take on this role. Councillor Carroll has his hand up.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, Chair. I had thought I'd already made this nomination when I submitted all of our other allocations back in May, but I could be corrected on that.
Chair, yes, this is a matter for the committee to deal with, so it wouldn't have been part of the annual meeting process.
Oh, so I submitted it, but it just didn't count for anything then.
Sorry, Councillor Carroll, perhaps not, no.
No, that's all right. Well, I'll nominate Councillor Haynes then, because I think he probably assumed he was already on there. So.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming that if Councillor Haynes is happy with his colleague's suggestion that he joins as the Conservative member, and do we have a nomination from the Labour group?
I think Ewan Goodjohn is our suggested representative.
So you can just confirm that Councillor Goodjohn is happy with that, or if anybody from the Labour group wants to disagree.
Yeah, I'm happy to take the role. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, so we got to confirm that that Councillor Ewan Goodjohn, Councillor Stephen Haynes, Councillor Ian Johnson are 3 members of the Democratic Services Subcommittee. There are 2 recommendations for the committee. One is that we note the terms of reference, the membership, and the provisions of the various elements there. The family absence for members of the Local Authorities Wales Regulations 2013 as amended by the family absence for members of the Local Authorities Wales and Member Relations 2021, and the statutory obligations imposed on the council. Can have somebody move those recommendations? Councillor Thomas, and somebody second them, please. Councillor Prothero, thank you very much. So move on to item 7, which is the annual report of the Head of Democratic Services, which again is being taken by Jeff Rees.
Thank you, Chair. Again, apologies, Chairman, for my my dulcet tones again. So this report, the purpose of the report is to provide the committee with a summary of the wide range of duties undertaken within the service area throughout the year. So it's looking back on the last year and any ongoing developments and plans that we may have for the future. So The background for the report sets out the division and how it's set up in terms of my area of responsibility. So part of my statutory role is to look after democratic services. I also have another statutory hat to wear, and that's the proper officer to the Ministry of Justice for the Council's Registrar Service, and that's to deal with births, deaths and marriages. But this report relates solely to the democratic services function, but it does indicate to members that I don't just have a role in regard to specifically to members in democratic. I also have another responsibility in terms of the council's registration service. So in terms of the staff structure, as I indicated in my earlier report on the agenda, I'm not recommending at this time any additional resources to the current structure, as I believe at this moment in time the current, they're considered sufficient to deal with the pressures, notwithstanding the fact that whilst we have talked and touched upon the requirements of the Local Government and Wales Elections Act, there are pressures within the team, and that's essentially linked to the management stroke production of remote virtual meetings that we've had to undertake over the last 2 or so years, and obviously bringing into existence what is fundamentally a cornerstone piece of legislation with that act. For example, new requirements for public participation. So earlier this year, we would have, as an authority, agreed a new public participation strategy. That includes the provision of electronic petitions scheme, and there would have been a team of officers working over the last 12 or so months looking at how we were going to initiate that part of the legislation. And we've procured through the project team a piece of software called Bang the Table, which will allow us, and is actually up and running. It's been up and running since I can't think of the exact date now, but certainly we've had provision for e-petitions. I believe from the 5th of May this year, we had to meet the requirements of the legislation, and that is available on the council's external website. But that again is an indication, in part, as a small element of dealing with the requirements of the new piece of the legislation. So that's just to give you a bit of an insight and flavour. Paragraph 2.6 sets out the current resources that I have within the democratic services function. So in all, the team consists of 12 members, but in terms of, in all reality, in terms of dealing with members on a day-to-day basis, that would be Karen as the principal officer, and then we got the 3 democratic scrutiny services officer. We got 1 cabinet member who's dealing obviously with the executive function of the authority. And we've got an assistant democratic servicer, which again is slightly different, supporting the team. And we have 1 officer supporting members and committee services, and that is spread across the function doing various bits. That also includes dealing with the mayor function. So 2018 saw a mini restructure of the what was then the cabinet mayor function, which saw that migrate across into my service area, and that would have seen that restructuring would have seen coming across to what is now sitting in Karen Bowen's team, obviously a revised structure, so less officers coming across, and essentially that service area being absorbed within Karen's team back in 2018. And essentially since then we've been, or certainly democratic services have been responsible for supporting under that heading of democratic services cabinet and the mayor's function. Paragraph 2.10 talks about a summary of the work that the team has undertaken over the previous 12 months, including any ongoing work and initiatives that the team has been actively engaged in. And these are set out in paragraphs 2.11 onwards. I don't know if you want me to stop there, Chair, if there's any questions at this point.
Any questions at this point for Jeff regarding his report? I see no hands, so feel free to carry on, Jeff.
So, as a consequence of the new legislation, obviously the council has been working with a team of officers, chief officers in particular, and I think I mentioned this back when we were talking, Chair, at the corporate performance meeting, and talking about the suite of statutory guidance that was under discussion, and that work was being overseen by a cohort of officers and an action plan to bring that into existence. So part of that work would have involved myself and Karen working on that with other officers like the monitoring officer, and that's resulted in obviously the need to bring the council's constitution up to date. So that's work that we've actively been working on, and that's also to ensure that certain requirements of the new legislation that needs to be brought in by the 5th of May were actually in the document itself, the council constitution, even though we're still waiting on that statutory guidance in certain areas. So we're ahead of the game whilst government are running slightly behind us in terms of where we need to be, and that's because of the trigger points within the legislation. So we will continue to work on the constitution once we see in the autumn what the new statutory guidance brings and what we'll need to do to bring any further arrangements up to date in the council constitution. They will be primarily around the local choice functions, and in fact the action plan group of officers met last week, and so for example the council's financial regulations and contract procedures, they're still in their old format and they will need to be brought up to date, and other HR related matters, for example the employees code of conduct, that will need to be brought up to date to reflect new requirements of the legislation, and there's some other areas that will need looking at and working on. So there'll be further reports coming through the reporting pipeline, so to speak, and obviously that will come to council in due course once we know where we are with Welsh Government. Nothing really further to say on that particular area, other than to say in paragraph 2.19 and through to paragraph 2.4, that's setting out the journey that the team have been on in terms of working on the development and capability of the council being in the right position to undertake its virtual meetings. And again, can I just thank members who were on the old authority who are now here, because that was quite a difficult pathway for members to come up to speed with the tech very, very quickly, I have to say. So it's a thanks to members who sort of met us halfway as officers, trying to get them supported and up to speed to allow them to participate in meetings. I know there was a bit of a lag in that process in terms of making sure that we had the right sort of solution that would tick a number of boxes that we needed to do. That isn't always easy as officers, because I have to say I'm no expert in this field, and by and large I think, you know, and I'm certainly not speaking on behalf of Karen, but certainly myself and Karen were certainly picking it up as we were going along, and I think other authorities were in a similar situation, and that's probably an indication of some of the another indication of challenges in terms of officers having to develop their own knowledge around this sort of stuff, because you know, if you want one for the pandemic, you probably wouldn't be, you know, where we are now, so to speak, in terms of the technology we've now got in place.
Let's go across, remember, Jeff, and see that Councillor Hanks has got a hand raised.
Yeah.
So I don't know if she wants to ask a question at this point.
Thank you, Chair. No, I was just going to say Jeff was thanking all members, but I think it's down to the help that we had from IT and Democratic Services, because at one point I felt like resigning as as a member. IT was like, you know, it's not my speciality, but I think I would like to say thank you for all the patience that everybody had getting us all up and running. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Hanks. Jeff,
thank you. Yes, thank you, Councillor Hanks. And no, it's certainly not underestimating the effort that members did go through to get themselves up to speed on that particular issue. Just wanted to say in paragraph 2.23, just to give members a flavour, we would have reported certainly in the last annual report, some analytics in terms of unique views of the council's meetings since live streaming. So that information is set out in Appendix 1 to the report, and hopefully that will give some members an indication of what the public demand is for virtual meetings. And then on to paragraph 2.25 through to paragraph 2.29. That also sets out some further analytical information relating to the council's public speaking arrangements relating to the planning committee and the scrutiny committee. Again, just to give members, particularly new members, a flavour of what is been happening around public engagement with members of the public engaging with our scrutiny committee and planning committee. Paragraph 2.29 onwards talks about member development, and again, just touching on what we were discussing in the early report. This is as a consequence of our member development strategy and the work that the Karen's team is doing to support virtual meetings as a requirement of the Act. Also working with our hybrid solution provider Civico to bring into life the requirements of the hybrid meetings. We did have some delays with the upgrade of the council chamber in terms of the technical requirements to do this type of streaming from the council chamber, but we did have delays, and that was essentially down to supply chain issues, which did put us back a bit. So that's really essentially why we had some delays in bringing that in and then testing and commissioning that equipment, but it's now in place. And as you know, we held a cabinet meeting last week. And again, from paragraph 2.34 onwards, that sets out some of the scrutiny committee activity. And again, I would just like to place on thanks, my personal thanks to the Karen's team for the efforts they've done. They've clocked up an awful lot of time off in lieu in doing this. And of course, if we got the team off with time off in lieu, they can't be in two places at once. So they've got to take their toil at some point. And if they're taking their toil, that means I lose them in the day. So it's a bit of a vicious circle in terms of the demands on the service. So yes, we have a lot of evening meetings, and yes, the demands on the team, the normal demands on the team would normally see one officer in attendance at meetings dealing with the governance sort of stuff, making sure that the committee runs smoothly. What we're seeing now is that we've got perhaps additional 2 officers in the background with a member of ICT to support members, getting online to the virtual meeting, or for whatever reason there might be in terms of an ICT matter. We've got somebody on standby like Andrew Brain, who's been enormously supportive of the team to get us through some of the problems we've had. So I just want to put on record my thanks to those officers for supporting the process, because without them we would have certainly struggled. Paragraph 2.37 to 2.55. I won't go through this, as this is only for information. As I said, I'm mindful this is quite a meaty report, and I hope members certainly have taken the time to read it and absorb some of the work that's ongoing. And of course, members have contributed to that in terms of the induction process that we talked about in earlier in the meeting. Paragraph 2.56 to 2.58 sets out the number of officers involved with the various working groups that we have in terms of collaborating with other authorities. These meet periodically through the year, and essentially that's about learning from other authorities, good practice and such like across all the sectors in Wales. So I'm also involved with one as the head of Democratic. There's an All Wales head of the Democratic group that we meet regularly with the WLGA and Welsh Government. Often than not, I'll be honest with you, Welsh Government picking our brains out to knock their legislation into shape. It's how it whilst technically they get the legislation onto paper, sometimes the actual implementation of it in real terms, that sometimes those little wrinkles, creases in that process have to be ironed out. And that process is a healthy process in terms of working with colleagues in Welsh Government to get everybody to a place where everybody needs to be. The paragraph 2.60 is about independent bodies, and I thought it would be useful to provide the committee, especially new members, with some insight into the role of the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales. The panel isn't solely concerned with remuneration; it's also sets determinations in relation to other types of support for elected members, for example, reimbursements of cost of care and ICT support. 2.61, just so members are aware, the IRPW over the last few years have consistently expressed the view that maintaining the democratic values of local government is not cost-free. So payments to members and co-opted members are made to encourage diversity and the take-up of people to work in local government where they perhaps wouldn't have come from. So that's working to the wider diverse agenda which Welsh Government have, and then ending on the other body that the authority works with, and that's the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales, which I don't think I need to go in. I think most members know what the Ombudsman for Wales service is. And then at the end of the report, paragraph 2.64 is a indication of the work that the team will be undertaking as we go forward for the rest of this year. Nothing else to say, Chairman. Recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. I think you've taken us through a very detailed annual report there, which I think aligned with item 5, I think is, although detailed, very helpful for, especially for new members in understanding the work that's undertaken. I will note just quickly note the tension between the number of times that you've explained how hard our staff work and in so many different ways, and the current position, which is not to request further resources, but I'm sure that'll be a discussion that this committee will have as we go forward. Can I ask the committee, are there any questions for the Head of Democratic Services with regards to his annual report? Please indicate using hand function. I'm seeing a lot of silence, which I'm sure means that everybody's read the report and is happy with the contents. In that case, can I ask that people do note the appendix, which is related to the number of views that these meetings have. Hopefully, this one is as important as others. I think it's largely amounts of transparency, although sometimes those numbers are not particularly large within democracy. As there are no questions, no hands being raised, can I ask that somebody moves the recommendation that we note the report? Yep, see Councillor Hanks and Councillor Haynes seconding that. So that's completed. So we now move to item 8, which is once again a report from the Head of Democratic Services, this time regarding members' annual reports, which is going to provide the context and format. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully members will find this relatively self-explanatory. The provision of members' ability to prepare and publish an annual report has been well established from the 2011 measure. I have to, in all fairness, say probably not that well patronaged. We haven't had a huge demand for these to happen. It is exclusively down to the individual member to sorry, I thought there was somebody wanted to speak then, Chair. Sorry. I think that was the background noise from somewhere. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. Sorry. Yeah. So it is essentially down to completely voluntary, I suppose is the word I'm looking for. There's no obligation on members to do that or to prepare one. What I would say is that if you are trying to perhaps want to inform your constituents of the work you're doing, you can use this as one of many other avenues to get that information across to your constituents. I'm obviously mindful that members do use their own systems, flyers, for example, door-to-door stuff, and I know some members are very hot on that. And I think that's also to be welcomed. I find, as a resident in my ward, I get, quite regular mail shots from one group in particular, which always makes interesting reading, I have to say. But one method for you as individuals is an opportunity to make what you want of the annual report process. There's only one caveat, is that I got certain editorial rights over what actually gets published, so it can't be defamatory. It's got to be factually correct. So there is some checks and measures in the process, but by and large, it's an opportunity for members once a year to take up the facility. All I'm trying to say, Chair, is that this is just raising the facility, given that we got new members on the council. And they may not already be aware of it. We would have put it in the councillor's handbook, referenced it there, and it's just again to shine some light on it. And it's again, the report is just there for members to note.
Thank you, Jeff. I mean, I do have some background information that might be helpful, but is anybody who's got any questions for the Head of Democratic Services on this matter before I speak? I see no hands. I mean, just a sort of quick bit of background, which is obviously this is part of the 2011 measure, and I was part of the Democratic Services Committee 10 years ago when this was brought in as an opportunity. And what happened, I believe, in the first couple of years that this was present was that the Democratic Services team chased people up, and requested that they submitted an annual report. That didn't happen in the last term, 2017 to 22, and therefore it's kind of fallen by the wayside. However, it's incumbent upon the council to have a system by which people can present an annual report. The challenges which the council faced when developing this a decade ago was how to present something which was suitable for being placed on the council website and was not overtly political in nature. And therefore the categories that were developed at the time, which are the same, I believe, as in the suggested report that's here in the appendix, are therefore asking councillors to prepare an annual report if they so wish, but to do so in as factual a manner as possible, which is not controversial or likely to create additional levels of criticism or issues for the non-political nature of our officers. The recommendation is that, subject to any comments the committee may have on the annual report template, members be informed of the facility for them to produce this for publication on the council's website as an annual report. An annual report, usually I think that's intended, as I say, following the municipal year from May to May, and therefore my suggestion would be that we haven't received any comments here today. If anybody does have any, then please forward them to the Head of Democratic Services and to myself, and that as we approach the end of the year, that we also send a reminder to all members to remind them that this facility is available should they wish to avail themselves, and have it published on the council website. There are I believe some examples of there from 2016-17 annual reports, which are still there on the website if people want to see what was written 5 years ago. But I don't think probably anybody has submitted any of these in the past 5 years, and there's been no chasing up of it done. But I mean, so if we can, I don't know if people are happy with that reminder going out as a second recommendation from this. If somebody's happy to second that. Yeah, I can see Councillor Thomas seconding that. So if we can move those two recommendations, then somebody like to move the recommendations? Councillor Hanks, and seconded by Councillor Thomas. Okay, thank you very much. So thank you for that, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair.
the sort of the committee work programme for the rest of the 22-23 year. Jeff?
Thank you, Chair. This is the last report for members to consider, unless I don't believe there are any urgent items for the committee to consider this evening. But certainly the report basically outlines a proposed work programme for the committee for 2022-23. Details are set out in paragraph 2.1 of the report for consideration. I've got nothing further to add, Chair, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Obviously, we've had a discussion already tonight about we'll be talking about the training and development in the autumn. Are there any other, bearing in mind the terms of reference for this committee, does anybody have any issues they feel have not been covered that they think should be covered by this committee as we go forward this year? I don't see any hands, therefore I'm going to assume that people are happy with the issues currently put forward. If anybody does have any suggestions for topics that they'd like to raise within the terms of reference of the committee, then please contact Jeff as Head of Democratic Services or myself with those in future. So are we happy to agree the work programme and timetable set out in this report, given that we've not made any suggestions for amendments? So move that, Jeff. George moving that, Councillor Haynes seconding that. So thank you very much. I don't think there are no urgent items under either part 1 or part 2. Just confirming that Jeff, as Head of Democratic Services, is happy with the end of that item. Yeah,
I am, Chair. Thank you.
In that case, thank you much for your attendance this evening, everybody. Diolch yn fawr iawn am ddod i'r pwyllgor gyntaf eleni. I have a good summer, those of you I don't see, and I'll see you in the autumn.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.